The escape pod crashed into the mud with a terrible sound. Metal screamed against rock and dirt. Fire burst from the engines for a moment, then died. Smoke rose into the gray sky of the unknown planet. Inside the pod, Ambassador Valara of the Deshan Collective tried to move her broken body. Blue blood dripped from her wounds. Her 4 eyes could barely focus on the emergency lights blinking around her. She had been important once. She had spoken for a civilization of 12 billion beings. The Deshans were known across the galaxy as the peaceful ones. They were the diplomats. They were the healers. They were the ones who solved conflicts with words instead of weapons. Every species respected them. Every species trusted them. But trust meant nothing when the Craven Empire attacked. The Craven were insectoid creatures with no concept of mercy. They consumed entire worlds. They had surrounded the Deshan diplomatic vessel 3 days ago. Valara had sent distress signals to every allied species. She had begged for help. She had reminded them of the treaties. She had reminded them of the promises. No one came. The Dorvani, who the Deshans had saved from a plague 2 centuries ago, sent a message saying they could not risk war with the Craven. The Mohawks Federation, whose entire economy the Deshans had rebuilt after the Great Collapse, expressed deep regret, but explained that their defense fleet was needed elsewhere. The quantum beings of Sector 7, who the Deshans had protected from extinction, simply did not respond at all. One by one, every gentle species abandoned them. Every peaceful ally looked away. Every friend became a stranger. The Craven boarded the diplomatic vessel. They killed everyone they found. Valara only escaped because her aide pushed her into the escape pod and launched it before the Craven could reach them. The last thing Valara saw was her aide being torn apart by claws and mandibles. Now she was alone on an uncharted planet. Her pod systems were failing. Her body was failing. She had maybe a few hours left to live. The pod scanner made a weak sound. Something was approaching. Valara felt fear rise in her chest. If it was the Craven, they would finish what they started. If it was a native predator, it would eat her. Either way, death was coming. The pod's door was ripped open. Light flooded in. Valara tried to scream, but only blood came out of her mouth. Standing in the doorway was the most terrifying creature she had ever seen. It was bipedal. It had only 2 eyes, both of them forward-facing like a predator. Its mouth was full of flat teeth designed for tearing meat. Its hands had 5 fingers, each one capable of gripping and crushing. It wore armor covered in scratches and burns. In its hand was a weapon that looked like it could destroy a small building. It was a human. Valara had heard stories about humans. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories. They were the newest species to achieve interstellar travel, but they had already built a reputation. They were violent. They were unpredictable. They solved problems with aggression and force. They had fought 3 wars in the 50 years since they joined the galactic community. Other species called them the brutal ones. The Deshan Collective had refused to make treaties with them. The humans were considered too dangerous, too uncivilized. The Deshans believed that the humans would eventually destroy themselves or be destroyed by a more advanced species. There was no point in building relationships with creatures who worshiped violence. Now one of those creatures was standing in front of Valara. It was looking at her with those predator eyes. It was studying her wounds. It was analyzing her like prey. Valara closed her eyes and waited for death. But death did not come. Instead, she felt gentle hands touching her wounds. She opened her eyes and saw the human had put down its weapon. It was pulling medical supplies from a pack on its back. It was wrapping bandages around her bleeding arms. It was injecting something into her neck that made the pain decrease. The human spoke into a device on its wrist. Its voice was rough and harsh, like rocks grinding together. Valara did not understand the language, but she understood the tone. The human was calling for help. It was urgent. It was demanding. More humans appeared. They came with stretchers and medical equipment. They moved with efficiency and purpose. They cut Valara free from her harness and lifted her out of the destroyed pod. They carried her across the muddy ground to a large vehicle that hummed with power. Inside the vehicle, human doctors surrounded her. They connected machines to her body. They studied her biology on screens. They argued with each other about the best way to treat her wounds. One of them noticed that she was conscious and leaned close to her face. This human was female. Her hair was red like fire. Her eyes were green like poison. She smiled, and the expression was strange on her predator face. She said something in that grinding language, then pressed a button on a small device. A translation voice came from the device. It said, "You are safe now. We will not let you die. What is your name?" Valara tried to speak. Her voice was broken and weak. "I am Valara, ambassador of the Deshan Collective." The translation device processed her words. The red-haired human nodded and spoke again. The device translated, "Ambassador Valara. I am Dr. Sarah Chun of the Human Frontier Course. You are on a planet we call Haven 3. We have a medical station here. We will heal you." Valara did not understand. The humans were supposed to be monsters. They were supposed to be savages. Why were they helping her? She managed to ask, "Why?" "My people refused to make peace with yours. We called you brutal. We called you dangerous. Why would you help me?" Dr. Chun listened to the translation and then laughed. It was a strange sound, somewhere between a bark and a song. She spoke, and the device translated, "You are injured. You are alone. You need help. What other reasons do we need?" The medical team worked through the night. They faced problems that would have stopped other species. Deshan biology was different from human biology. The medicines were designed for human bodies. The equipment was calibrated for human patients. None of it should have worked on Valara. But the humans refused to give up. They adapted their medicines. They recalibrated their equipment. When one approach failed, they tried another. When that failed, they tried a third. They brought in specialists through communication links. They consulted databases from across human space. They argued and debated and experimented. By morning, Valara was stable. Her wounds were healing. Her body was growing stronger. The human doctors looked exhausted, but they were smiling. They had saved a life. For them, that was enough. Over the following days, Valara learned more about the humans. She learned that Haven 3 was a rescue station. The humans had built it specifically to help any travelers who crashed on the planet. They had stations like this across the frontier of their space. Any species in distress could find help there. No questions asked. No payment demanded. She learned that the humans had been watching the Craven attack on the Deshan vessel. Their ships were too far away to intervene directly, but they had tracked the escape pods. They had sent rescue teams to every planet where pods might have landed. They have found 3 other survivors on different worlds. All of them were being treated at human medical facilities. Valara asked Dr. Chun why the humans would do this. Why would they spend resources helping a species that had rejected them? Dr. Chun sat down beside Valara's bed. She thought for a long moment before answering. The translation device captured her words carefully. "Our history is full of violence," she said. "We have done terrible things to each other. Wars, massacres, cruelty that we are ashamed to remember. But that same history taught us something important. It taught us that compassion is a choice. Every day, we choose who we want to be. We can choose to be monsters, or we can choose to be better." She looked at Valara with those strange predator eyes. "The galaxy calls us brutal because we fight hard. But fighting hard does not mean we cannot also love hard. We protect our own with everything we have. And when we find someone in need, we try to help them become our own too." Valara thought about her own people. The Deshans were gentle. They were peaceful. They had built a reputation across the galaxy as the civilized species. But when the Kraven attacked, the Deshans had done nothing. They had sent diplomats to negotiate instead of ships to fight. They had tried to reason with an enemy that did not understand reason. And their allies, the other gentle species, had abandoned them because helping would require risk. The humans would never have abandoned anyone. They would have come with their weapons blazing. They would have fought the craven ship to ship. They might have lost. They might have died. But they would never have stood by while innocent beings were slaughtered. Sometimes Valara realized gentleness was just another word for cowardice. And sometimes the brutal ones were the only ones brave enough to be kind. Weeks passed. Valara healed completely. The humans offered to transport her back to Theshan space. Their ship would pass through dangerous territory. The craven might attack. The journey was risky. The human captain was a tall man with dark skin and a scarred face. He looked like death walking. His crew looked the same. They were soldiers. They were warriors. They were everything the Theshans had feared. But when Valara boarded their ship, they treated her like family. They gave her the best quarters. They cooked food that was safe for her biology. They played music and told jokes that the translation device struggled to explain. They invited her to eat with them. They asked about her homeworld. They listened to her stories with genuine interest. One night, the ship's sensors detected craven vessels nearby. The captain ordered battle stations. The crew ran to their positions with practiced speed. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. Everyone prepared to fight. Valara watched from the bridge. She saw no fear in the human faces. She saw focus. She saw determination. She saw beings who were ready to die to protect their ship and everyone on it. The craven vessels changed course. They moved away. Perhaps they sensed that this human ship would not be easy prey. Perhaps they had learned that humans fought back. Perhaps they simply had other targets in mind. The human captain relaxed and grinned at Valara. The translation device captured his words. Another day alive. Not bad. The ship reached Theshan space without further incident. Valara stood in the airlock, preparing to return to her people. Dr. Chen and Captain Marcus were there to say goodbye. Valara bowed in the Theshan gesture of deepest respect. You saved my life. You owe me nothing, and I owe you everything. How can I ever repay this debt? Captain Marcus shook his head. No, Dad. This is just what we do. Dr. Chen added, but if you want to do something, tell your people what happened. Tell them that the brutal ones came when the gentle ones ran away. Maybe next time, things will be different. Valara returned to the Theshan collective. She told her story to anyone who would listen. She told the council. She told the media. She told ordinary citizens in the streets. She described how the gentle species of the galaxy had abandoned the Theshans in their moment of need. She described how the humans, the species they had rejected as too violent, had rescued her without asking for anything in return. The story spread across Theshan space. It spread beyond to other worlds. It made species reconsider what they knew about humans. It made them question whether brutality and compassion were really opposites. The Theshan Council voted to open diplomatic relations with the Human Federation. It was a historic moment. It was the beginning of a new alliance. Valara became the first Theshan ambassador to the humans. She spent the rest of her life building bridges between species. She attended human celebrations and mourned at human funerals. She learned their language without needing a translation device. She learned to laugh like them, that strange bark song sound. And whenever anyone asked her about humans, she told them the truth. The gentle ones were not always kind. The brutal ones were not always cruel. And sometimes, the creatures with predator eyes and meat-tearing teeth were the only ones willing to extend a helping hand to a stranger bleeding in the mud. That was the lesson the galaxy needed to learn. That was the lesson Valara spent her life teaching. Compassion was never about being gentle. It was about being brave.